Hello everyone, welcome to my Evil Within 2, Akumu difficulty, no upgrade / keys walkthrough, and this is Chapter 5, Lying in Wait, and Chapter 6, On the Hunt. And I've included Chapter 6 because it's a very short chapter, and there aren't that many threats in Chapter 6. And you might notice that compared to my no commentary version, this one is a lot shorter. It's because I've done a lot more editing just to make it easier for myself. And I think that's what I'm going to do for my future videos. I'm going to do a lot more editing. And to anyone who would like to see the unedited parts of the walkthrough, they can just check out my no commentary version. And all I'll be editing out is just the moments where you're not doing anything, or you're not under any kind of threat whatsoever. But there are parts of Chapter 5 I'm not going to edit out because I have so much respect for what they've done with Chapter 5. But in that area I was just in, if you go near the gazebo, you'll find a smoke bolt and some gunpowder, and then you can actually go into this boss fight, which you can completely skip. So this is the first time the Evil Within 2 is introducing bosses that you can skip. Aside from the Sentinel boss fight from Chapter 6 of the Evil Within, but I don't really count it because you can't skip the fight immediately. This, you can actually skip the fight entirely without having to engage the Guardian, and it's best you do that because the Guardian has a lot of life. And what you want to do in the beginning of this fight is you want to run towards that trap in order to trigger the slow motion so that she gets caught in it, and then you are able to get away from her and she'll never find you. Now, you're going to need to pick up that shock bolt over there, and then you need to pick up the smoke bolt and a couple of supplies from these crates if you want to. And then once you've done that, you're going to need to go around City Hall, and there's going to be a couple of explosive barrels in your way. You need to shoot them, and this will attract her over to where you are. But this is where the smoke bolt is going to come in handy, because when she runs through the smoke, it's going to temporarily stop her, and she'll be immobilized. And it'll buy you enough time to get over to the shortcut. And if you want to move even faster, you can use the cover system, because what you're seeing right here is when I'm using the cover system, it's not draining my stamina, but I'm also maintaining maximum speed. It is a very powerful technique, and you need to get into the habit of using it a lot if you're trying to close in on enemies to do sneak kills. But there is the doorway, and the Guardian is nowhere in sight because she's been stunned by the smoke bolt. And now we just have to mash X in order to get through this door. And if you want to make this go by a little bit faster, use both of your fingers in order to mash the button very quickly. And that is the end of that boss fight. And now we are on to City Hall, which is honestly one of my favorite areas of the game, and it respects the survival horror so much. It looks fantastic, it has a great atmosphere, and it's an area that still gives me the chills to this day. It's these kind of areas in Evil Within 2 that make it feel scarier than the Evil Within 1. It's the same case with Theodore's Domain when you first reach it in Chapter 9. Like, that is another area that truly encapsulates the evil that is around you by using torture chambers, narrow corridors, and ambient music. It just further personifies the psychopathic nature of Theodore, much like how City Hall does the same with Stefano. I mean, look at it! Look what you're seeing right now, with him just leaving his signature everywhere you go, when he's just freezing everyone and killing them. Just to comment on Stefano, he is truly a memorable character. Like, his voice acting is phenomenal, his personality feels vibrant, much like his obsession with art, and he truly feels like a psychopath. His love of things that many would consider vulgar is fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of people have shown such love to equally vulgar things. I feel like there is a bit of Stefano in everyone. Like, I've never been so fascinated by a villain in a game. They did Stefano justice in this game. I especially love the little moment where he freezes Sebastian and taunts him when he tries to restart the emitter. I've committed that dialogue to memory at this point. I know that a lot of people compare him to that artist from Bioshock 1, but that artist had nothing on Stefano. In fact, I had actually posted a video a long time ago that showcased Stefano's case file records and background. That was all it was. Yet, that video has received at least 3,000 views with 98 likes. If a small channel like myself is receiving that many views for simply showcasing the bio of a character, it's definitely clear that the developers have made a lovable character. But grab the rose and the emerald necklace and then rotate the mannequin to that position, and then focus the camera in order to create a new pathway, and that is a really cool way of making a pathway. You see it in frame, and it just turns into a 3D image. Fantastic. And this right here, you have to go near these paintings and light them up in order to trigger the doorway to appear. There's going to be some moments where the game is going to shift the environment when it's off camera. It's something reminiscent of Batman Arkham Knight, where you turn the camera away from the environment and the game just loads in a new area, but it worked so poorly on Batman Arkham Knight. The game had so much trouble loading in the right assets to create the new environment. This game isn't like that. This game loads in the new assets instantaneously when you reach a particular area of the room. It is so seamless, and it feels like you're not spending so much time in this area just waiting for a trigger to happen. You are actually controlling the triggers on the sequence by performing these specific actions, and it allows you to control the flow of this whole entire section if you want to be immersed in it, or if you just want to progress with the game. And when it comes to these kind of sections in survival horror games or horror simulators, they're often done very poorly in different kinds of ways. A great example that comes to mind is Outlast 2. In Outlast 2, for most of Chapter 3, you spend the entire time on a raft out on the lake, just paddling through these rocky areas, and it is a horrible sequence. Not only does it completely waste time by forcing you to be slow in a game that's meant to be fast, but it lasts way longer than it should, and the controls for the raft were bad. They felt so rigid. You would be trying to turn in a particular direction, and it took forever, or you'd be trying to move forward, but you barely gained any kind of increase in speed. That's not even mentioning the moments where you randomly get stuck on geometry or on a dead body in the lake. That is an example of a sequence done very poorly, and it almost felt like the developers ran out of ideas as to what to put for that section, so they just rushed it out the door. There was no tension, there was no kind of atmosphere that felt different to what you had already experienced before that chapter, and it instead led to frustration. I can't even remember the last time I've played that chapter, and the only time I've ever played that chapter is when I'm forced to play it on insane difficulty. And if you don't know what insane difficulty does in the Outlast series, it's basically nightmare difficulty where the enemies kill you in about 2 hits, but they've removed all of the checkpoints, so you have to watch all of those unskippable cutscenes again, and you have to go through all of those downtime moments all over again if you want to get through the game again if you die. Yeah, good luck having the sanity necessary to go through that terrible section if you die on that difficulty. I just don't understand the mentality of Red Barrels when it came to designing a lot of parts of Outlast 2. Tango Gameworks is not like them, thankfully. They actually had a lot of thought put into these kind of sections to benefit the flow of the game. And I especially like that moment. Did you notice how when I turned around, the game just loaded in the new assets instantaneously, even though they were on camera? That was pretty cool. And in that whole moment, where it looks like you have a straight shot to that light, but it just goes down into the depths of hell, that right there is pretty symbolic, and it's really cool. And I believe right here, we're coming across one of Stefano's victims, because he often cut off the heads of his female victims when he was trying to pose them. And I believe the head that's being shown here is the head of Emily Lewis, and she was mentioned in the newspaper that I just read in that previous section. But it cuts to black, and Obscura is going to be taking photos of us. And when she's finished taking her photos, it will then cut to this anxiety-inducing section. Look at this. This is definitely one of the best moments of the game. It's not relying upon any enemies whatsoever, it's just relying upon its atmosphere, and it really shows here that this game is a true survival horror game with these kind of sections. I remember seeing this section for the very first time, and I definitely felt a bit of terror when I first saw this section. And I just like the ambient music that is playing in the background, where you're just hearing a heartbeat, and then you're hearing this unsettling instrumentation that perfectly complements the atmosphere of this section. And once we've reached this particular part of the city hall, we are about to begin the boss fight against Obscura, which is a pretty simple fight, because it involves you repeatedly stunning Obscura to allow the emitter to count down. And how this works is, she's going to freeze the emitter by taking a picture of it, and in order to allow the timer to start counting down, you have to stun her. And the best way to stun her is to use the pistol and aim for the camera. The camera is her weak spot. It'll take about 6 shots from your pistol in order to fully stun her. And you have to be very careful with this boss. She runs very fast, and she has a lot of long-range attacks. This attack right here, if you keep moving backwards while you're shooting her, she can't hit you. But now that I've stunned her, she is going to go for the emitter when the announcer announces the time twice. And the announcer announces the time in 10-second intervals. So she just mentioned the time just then. So Obscura is going to be trying to go for the emitter, but I'm going to stop her by using shock bolts. And I'm just wasting her time right now. The shock bolts are so good at stunning her. And I believe this is the only way to stun her when the timer is counting down. When the timer is counting down, she doesn't seem to respond to stuns when you're using guns. When the timer's not counting down, however, she responds to stuns if you deal enough damage to her. But she's frozen the emitter again, and she's on the ceiling. This is absolutely important. Never ever go after her when she's on the ceiling. She is incredibly dangerous when she's on the ceiling. Her attacks are way faster, and they're almost impossible to get away from. I mean, you could probably use another shock bolt just to stun her and get her off the ceiling, or maybe just shoot her off. But I just remain very cautious with Obscura when she's on the ceiling. And eventually, when she's spent enough time on the ceiling, she's going to come back down. And it's around this time that she decides to come down, and I'm just going to shoot her from cover just to deal with some damage before she has a chance to get over here. And that right there is an aiming counter. Whenever you aim at Obscura long enough, she will always jump towards you, and it covers a lot of range, but it's not that bad. It's not an actual attack, it's just the way they get close to you. And you can actually run forward, and it's going to make it that much harder for her to get close to you in order to deal with you. So you can use that jumping animation as a way of putting Obscura in a spot where you're going to damage her, or you can use it as a way to bide your time and just wait for the timer to count down a little bit more. And right there, I tried to shoot Obscura with the harpoon bolt, but it didn't elicit any kind of stun. It's probably because the timer was counting down. Either that, or I probably hit the slow motion field, because if you try to shoot through the slow motion field, it will stop your shots, and you won't be able to do damage to her. So always make sure that Obscura is not within the slow motion field so that you can actually damage her. And this is actually the final part of the fight. And Obscura's not going to have enough time to slow down the emitter. And for some reason, she jumps onto the ceiling instead of slowing down the emitter. And that is the end of this fight. And now that the emitter's been activated, City Hall has been stabilized, and Stefano's influence has left this area. And it has moved on to the theater district, so we have to make our way over to the theater, and this is where Chapter 6 begins. And before you leave this whole entire area, always make sure to check the side of City Hall, because the crates that you destroyed when you were trying to make your way over to this shortcut can drop items. And they are actually preserved even though you went inside of City Hall. And then right here, I go inside of Sebastian's room so I can craft some additional crossbow bolts. And I have a lot of supplies necessary to make these crossbow bolts. So the crossbow bolts that I used against Obscura are well spent because I have the resources necessary to make them. And the cool thing about the workbench system is that every time you craft on any difficulty that is not classic difficulty, you will always get a checkpoint. So I just made a checkpoint for myself. I didn't have to restart the checkpoint, thankfully, but it's still really cool that that exists. So for Chapter 6, there are only 3 lost. One of the lost I'm going to have to kill because he's going to try to attack me the moment I pick up the handgun ammo pouch. The other 2 lost are just munching on a corpse, so I'm just going to run past them. And then after I've dealt with the lost, I'm going to have to deal with a boss-like enemy called the Watcher. And the Watcher is a boss-like enemy that you can skip, and there's really no incentive to even try to kill it, because all it drops is just green gel, and it's not blocking any progress, and you can easily run past it. You do not have to be in stealth whatsoever when it comes to getting past the Watcher. You can just simply run past it in full-blown combat, because the attack animation that it does is incredibly slow, and the tracking on it is very fair. And it's very important that you understand how to avoid that move that the Watcher does, because the final boss will do the exact same move on one particular phase. But here are the 2 lost. I'm just going to run past them, and then I'm just going to skip directly to the Watcher, and this is how you avoid the Watcher. So, get up off the cover, and then just run. And the boss is going to see me, but its attack animation is going to be very slow, because what the attack animation is it will basically spawn arms out of the ground, and depending on where you are, the moment the arms finish their rising animation, they will always attack you in that spot, but it's so easy to avoid because it's very slow, and I've just gotten past that Watcher, and the Watcher's going to try to attack me here in a non-rail section, similar to Dead Space, where you get grabbed in the leg and you're getting pulled by the tentacle and you have to shoot it. Only on this game, you're not having to waste ammo in order to do these kind of moments. On Dead Space, you had to have ammo to do these moments. So just shoot the Watcher 5 times in the head and it will go away. And when you return to this area, if you're trying to do the side mission with Sykes, you will not see this enemy. It will just be replaced by a bunch of Lost. And there will also be a Hysteric. But it's not a problem whatsoever. And once we reach Hoffman's safe house, that will conclude Chapter 6, so stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.